Hey everyone, I'm Chuck Hogan and welcome to Your Best Life. And also welcome to the Spanglish World Network on Zingo TV channels 250 and 251. Please remember to download the Zingo TV app on your respective app stores on iOS and Android. Always remember to download and make sure you rate and leave a comment. The app's completely free. Zingo TV is also available on Google Chromecast, Amazon, Fire and Fire TV sticks, and of course Roku and Roku TV sticks, and all smart TVs 2016 and forward. So, that's an intro. And I want to thank you all for joining us tonight. We have one of the most amazing guests. I had the pleasure of meeting the amazing, the brilliant Susan Bratton at an event for Your Best Life a few years back in San Diego. And it was what we call our family trip, which is really about relationships. And so if you haven't been exposed to Susan, I'm just here to tell you, she is the intimacy expert to millions of people. She is the maven of magic, the mistress of romance, and just the purveyor of all things beautiful when it comes to relationships, connection, love, and communication. So please, Susan, thank you for joining us tonight. It is such a blessing to have you here this evening.
Chuck, I like to do anything you want to do. You are my favorite playmate these days. So I'm happy to be here. Happy to talk. Let's talk about love.
You know what, girl?
Shall we?
Do it. It's interesting because in today's climate, and you and I have had many conversations about this, but it's really interesting just to see what love looks like now. Like, truthfully, what is love in today's 21st century definition of our existence? And you deal with so many different peoples and so many different modalities of life. And when you asked me, you go, so what are we going to talk about tonight? And I was like, you know what? Thank goodness I'm not in the dating game, because I wasn't great at it the first time around. And I found my soulmate, my wife and Julie, now going on 36 years. And it's beautiful. And I'm so blessed. What do you say to the folks that are like going, I'm single and ready to mingle. Yeah. I'm looking for love. It seems like in all the wrong places. Susan, where do I find a good man or a good woman? Because this is getting a little bit crazy out there. All the dating sites, all the swipe left, swipe right, and I thought it was getting complex when it was Match.com, and I was hearing about friends doing that. Where are you finding people's concentric mindset around what is this thing called dating and love?
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I was thinking a lot about the history of love relationships, and there have been eras of types of love. The first era of love was that you were the notion of love. Most people, before we started the first era of love, was we were matched together to hold property.
Right. It was an arrangement, right? It was an arrangement. How do we excel and move our family?
And before that, people wasn't really, people didn't even think about love. It was like they were holding on for their lives, just trying to stay alive. So the first era of love was arranged marriages. The second era was this notion of that you could fall in love. It was the beginning of romantic love. And that was Victorian era. Honestly, it began in the Victorian era. That's when you started to see things like greeting cards with hearts and flowers on them and things like that. And then the third era of love has been almost back to the transactional because of things like dating apps. And we are entering into the fourth era of love. And the fourth era of love is very interesting. Nielsen, who is a television's rating company, the movie studios use Nielsen to do a lot of data collection about what people want to see on television and in the movies. What are the trends? And one of the trends was so interesting, and it was that younger people now don't even want to see the classic romantic comedies. They don't want to see rom-coms. They want what they want to see are friendships, because rom-coms are this predictable boy meets girl, girl falls in love, they kiss, and then all of a sudden it's, complete. And the next generation is really eschewing the notion of this kind of romantic love, to the point where they're only interested in seeing friendships and relationships. They want to see a lot of diversity, equity, inclusion. They want to see variety of relationships in the consensual non-monogamy world. Their idea of relationship is entirely different than your and my
Sure.
generation of relationship. So we're in this fourth era. And another thing that's also interesting is that, first there were Match.com and things like that, eHarmony and Match.com for relationships. And that's when Dr. Helen Fisher, who I get to meet next week in Manhattan, working on the documentary that they're doing about my life and my work, which I'm so thrilled about, meeting her about it. And she was the one that really looked at all the Match.com data and said, oh, there are 4 types of people with regard to romance. And I think it was like the builder, the negotiator, the adventurer, and I forget what the 4th one was, and she looked at these massive data sets for the first time in the history of relationship about people's different approaches to love. And then we had the Gottmans and, the 5 love languages and, all these different things, which was very interesting to help you get a better sense of what you were looking for in relationship, but it was still that singular relationship. So then dating apps started, the Tinders came around and people got really, really tired of feeling that, men were a little predatory and women got kind of wigged out. So then Whitney Hurd came on the scene with Bumble, where the women were in control. But now that's moving toward a new generation of apps. Apps like Noah Ilan's app, which is called Plural, I think it is. She just had to rename it. It's called Plural. That's an app that's more around community experiences and creating friendships. So instead of it being dating, it's really relating. And so that's where we currently are. Where we currently are is that people don't, and there's one more piece of it, and that is that when I go out and I talk, when I do a live meeting and presentation, when I'm speaking, and I'm in an audience where there are people in their 20s and 30s, they come up to me and they say, I am lonely. I have all the apps in the world and I am lonely. I don't have a social life. I have to work all the time because I can barely afford to pay my rent. I'm forced to live in community because I can't, really even afford to live by myself anymore. Jobs are going offshore. That's becoming a global phenomenon. I mean, there are a lot of simultaneous pressures happening to what love looks like. So what love looks like now is wildly different than what love has looked like even 5 years ago.
Pre-COVID, right?
So I think pre-COVID. Yes, COVID really did. And now we do a lot of like first dates on Zoom. And there's video integrated into dating apps now. So you can actually have your first meet and greet virtually rather than IRL. So no more walks in the park and meeting for coffee for the first time. You really have to meet each other online the first time and just kind of suss out what you can. So the bottom line is that most people are still heterosexual, monogamous, and interested in a pair bond. Less women are interested in being married than have ever been. Because women now, there are 69% of college graduates are women. Men aren't graduating from college. And women are making still, as we know from the latest WNBA stories in the news, still not making financial parity with men, but that is shrinking.
Thank goodness.
And women are able to not have to be married not be expected to have children. And add to that, there's the fertility capabilities of women being able to postpone, not feeling the pressure to have to get married to have their children. They can cryogenically freeze their eggs. And one of my best friends had her daughter last year at 45. Wow. So that's also having a big impact on dating.
And aging cycles now too. I mean, we're living longer.
We're living longer.
And so that's a paradox as well, because I know statistically speaking, if you're a single man in a retirement environment, and if you can dance, you're really a very fortunate soul, because you may have your dance card filled constantly. Yes. And to that point, there's so many more women though, because they're outpacing men in lifespan, in activity, mental clarity, emotional stability and development. And I was like,
Well, and also STIs, the most rampant population for sexually transmitted diseases and infections is 55 up. So people are staying sexually active a lot longer too. People are having a lot more partners. Now we have at-home collection STI kits where we can keep it in the house like we have a COVID test, and we can mail them back. And within 24 to 48 hours of receipt, we've got results via text. I'm the chief advocacy officer for a company called Basis DX, and this is their next generation business. They came out of the COVID testing world and said, what are we going to do? We think the big market is STI, home collection STI testing. You don't have to go to the LabCorp anymore and get a needle in your arm, because most people hate them. And so I think there's just so many interesting things about what's going on. But the one thing that I would say that has held true, this is my glimmer of hope, okay? Because there are a lot of market forces that feel like they're against us. My glimmer of hope is that one of my mentors is Dr. Deborah Anapol. Now, she's passed, but she wrote a book called The 7 Natural Laws of Love. And what she said was that if you want to feel more love, the way to feel more love is to actually give love. So when people talk to me and they say, I have so much love to give, but I don't feel like I have a way to give it. Women don't seem to, and it's mostly men who talk to me and they say, women don't seem to find me attractive, or I never get a second date, or, these kinds of things. What am I going to do? Am I going to be alone forever? Am I ever going to find anyone? What's wrong with me? And I say, here's the solution that has worked for other people who've been in your situation. And that is 2 things. Number 1, you have to start giving love everywhere you go. You can't hold it for the one special person that's going to come along. You need to practice loving. And in the practice of loving, your cashier, the dentist who just repaired your broken tooth, which I raced back here to do the live event because that's what happened to me. In the loving and gratitude and appreciation, when you live in a loving heart, you are going to feel more in love, in the sphere, in the swirl of love. And if you take the time that you have, that you could be dating and doing meet and greets if you could get them, and you could go do some philanthropy, go help other people out, help those less fortunate. And in the doing of that and the giving of the love, you're going to start attracting people that you're not attracting now because you're coming from scarcity, from lack, from grief, from aloneness. And so when you flip that, it is kind of that law of attraction. You're going to attract that love into your life in a way that you won't if you don't do it.
That's brilliant. There's this nuance, and I hear people say this. They go, "Oh, I'm emotionally broken," and I go, "Well, excuse me? Like, really? You're one of the kindest people I know. You seem so connected. People, are engaged with you, and yet
Yeah.
there's these nuances I hear about folks, and I get a little concerned for some of these people that I know, and they're like going, I just don't want to get serious, but yet everything they're doing is in preparation or in this yearning to have a special someone, a connection, a deep connection, and yet they seem to migrate with the same standard operating procedure. Oh, I'll go on a trip. I'll become part of an interest group because I want to be around like-minded people, and then only to find out that they're not like-hearted at all. Like their belief systems and their values and their rules are completely misaligned. They may have common interests, and they go, oh, that's enough to create connection. I go, wait, so you'll bifurcate love and deep like connection communication to just hook up? And I was so taken aback because I was like, wait, you just met this person 4 hours ago, and you go, oh yeah, but we had chemistry, and you slept with them within 6 hours. And it was like going, and if it was one time, Susan, it would be one thing. And I'm not judging. I was confused by it because I was like going, wow, you're giving like the essence of you. And I know this person well. You're giving the essence of you and giving it away. And I like go, why would you do that? And I've met guys and gals the same. And it's like going, now for the guys, they were like, oh, it's a conquest. It's like more notches in my bullet belt. And I'm like going, really? Like, are you 5? Like, it's like the person that has the most toys wins. At the end of the day, I was like, going, the most conquests. I'm like, who are you, Genghis Khan? Like, what are you gonna ride in here on some bull elephant and beat your chest? And that's supposed to be a attraction strategy. But you brought up a beautiful point, and thank you for this. And it is really the identity that people are owning, right, or not, and it's keeping them in this low energetic space where their attraction strategy is that they're getting what they're willing to tolerate.
Yeah. There's a couple things that I want to say about the scenario that you lay out. One is that I do like this concept of deal flow. I come from Silicon Valley and the venture capital world, and we think about things in the time of deal flow. And dating and relationships are very similar to that. You've got to have a full pipeline when you're looking for the one. And yet sleeping with every single person is going to have a lot of downstream detrimental effects to you. Now, I'm a sexpert. I'm a relationship and sexpert. And what I do is teach people passionate lovemaking techniques. So I don't have any problem with people having sex. I'm trying to get everybody to have more and better sex. This is what I do. But safe sex. And the thing about when you get into dating, you've got to really become aware of some of the issues around about a decade ago, we changed the nomenclature, not we, because I didn't do it. The nomenclature was changed from sexually transmitted infections, STIs, to STDs. From STDs, sexually transmitted diseases, to STIs, sexually transmitted infections. That's kind of the new lingo. And I really felt like that was a grave disservice to people because basically there are over 20 different bacterias, viruses, and parasites. And that's 20 at a minimum. That's 20 that we could test for or become aware of. It doesn't include the 50 varieties of herpes or things like that, right? It just doesn't even take into account all of the different kinds of viruses, bacteria, and parasites that can be exchanged through people. One of the issues is that condoms don't protect you from the large majority of these viruses, diseases, these viruses, bacteria, and parasites. They just don't. And they're from skin to skin contact. So that's the first thing, is that a person who is serially having these hookups and one night stands is they're basically a germ vector that's transmitting a lot of potential, not just infections, but diseases. And even if they use a condom. And I always recommend that you have a lot of fun, sensual activities with prospective partners, but I look at them as an A level and a B level. A level is very, very safe. And that is you can touch a person and you can kiss
Mhm.
them, and you're fairly limited on the number of things that could be transmitted.
Right.
But once you have mouth to genital or genital to genital contact, it spikes as far as the danger. And the thing that is coming out right now is that even things, and so many people have herpes viruses, but one of the things that a lot of sexperts in my world, they dismiss, and so do people in the adult film industry. They dismiss, and they have the highest testing rates of all people who are highly
Sure.
sexually active. But they dismiss herpes as almost like a non-issue. But now the data and research are showing direct correlations to Alzheimer's disease and dementia, as well as things like trigeminal neuralgia
Wow.
from simple herpes viruses.
Interesting.
So one of the things that when I started to work with the Basis DX company, I said, I want the comprehensive 8 panel that you have to be the standard that we talk about, but you must also provide people with the opportunity to add in HSV 1 and 2 as an incremental part of the home collection kit that you send them. Because even if someone has it, I've got them both. I've had them. I have had herpes 1 since I was a child, and I got herpes 2 when a boyfriend cheated on me in my early 20s.
Interesting.
Just after I lost my virginity at 19, my next boyfriend gave me herpes.
Wow.
And so I've always been very, very sensitive to these kinds of things because for me, those have been painful infections. And I never wanted to give them to anybody. And so throughout my career as a sex and relationship expert, I have been teaching people how to have the safe sex talk, when to have the safe sex talk, and what STD tests to get. And I still call them STDs because you can get diseases. The difference between an infection is that you can clear it, and a disease is that you can't necessarily get rid of it. And the interesting thing too is that if you look at your health, including your mental and emotional health, your gut microbiome is one of the most important assets that you have in your entire life. Your friends, your family, your gut microbiome. I mean, it runs you. It runs your immune system. It runs your cognitive function. It runs everything. And the problem is that a lot of people are cavalierly having a lot of sex and getting things like chlamydia, gonorrhea, syphilis, things that can be taken care of with antibiotics. But every time you put an antibiotic in your body, you are detonating your gut microbiome. That's bringing your cognitive function down. It's bringing your immune system down. It's bringing your food digestion system. It's bringing your peristalsis down. And so these are really things that are very, very important to be considering. So having good deal flow, but using A-level relating until you decide that this is a person that you want to go further with, that you'd like to be intimate with, very intimate with, then you should have an STI test. So I want you to get out there. I want you to meet people. I want you to use the apps. I want you to understand what you're looking for. And I know that's where we're going with this. But I also want you to be very, very safe about how you do it, because just taking antibiotics afterward, if you happen to get something, is really it's only not only short-term stupid, it's long-term stupid. It's going to shorten your life and make your health span shorter. Even if you lived as long, it's not going to be as long and healthy a life. And I stand for ageless sexuality and ageless romance. I want you to be having great sex and fantastic intimacy until the day you die. Because what did the Harvard longevity study say? It said the longest study of health span in the world, over 85 years now, I think it is. I've lost how many 80s we're into now. That full stop, intimacy and relationship is the best defense for longevity. You want a long and happy life, you should be in a relationship, but it needs to be the kind of relationship that is one where you're still having great sex.
Well,
as
and that's
well.
when they say, "Are you in a healthy relationship?" That's really what we're talking about, is that it's not one thing, it's all things. And
Yeah.
I love what you said, and it's so important to understand that A, B, C level, engagements with people,
Yeah.
that
A and B.
it becomes so important to understand that your value unconsciously as well is associated to what are you giving away. And it's like, so are
Right.
you honoring self? And really that's what we're talking about to a great degree, because what
Yes,
if
it
we
is.
don't honor self, love self, care for self, makes it
Yeah.
extremely difficult to elevate and to attract and be at a frequency that actually creates that gravity, that you actually bring people that resonate with you and aren't just like-minded, they're actually like-hearted. Because I see folks that they
Hmm.
know the lingo. It's like, oh, they've studied and they're very adept, they're intellectually have prowess, yet they have very shallow character in some instances, where you're like going, "Well,
Right.
okay, so when it comes to
Yeah.
shove, you'll say
Hmm.
what you believe someone wants to hear, but that's not really your true context of character." And I've
Yes.
always, let me rephrase that. When I was younger, I didn't always honor the fact, like, that my wife would have a gut feeling. I could have saved
Hmm.
millions in lost revenue. No
Hmm.
embellishment on my part. Millions in poorly invested strategy. I just listened to my wife's gut biome and what it was
Hmm.
saying to her. And the truth was
Yeah.
is that I let my cognitive processes overrun, rather than trusting that loving connection that we have. And I've learned. Thank you. I'm a lifelong learner, loser, winner. No, was a lifelong learner.
Lifelong winner.
And it's made such a
Yeah.
big difference in the value of our relationship too. Because now at 57 and 56, we have never been more happy. We've never been more engaged, more in love, more passionate. And it's so much fun to be able to enjoy energetic center. And I know that we embarrass our kids on a daily basis, and I love it.
I don't think that's true, Chuck. I don't think you do embarrass your kids. When you are, you know what I hear the most from people? I'm really glad to hear that you think you're embarrassing your kids because you're so loving to each other, because most people complain to me that their parents never showed any love,
Mm,
and that they felt like they came from a stoic,
sure.
family where there was no touch and affection and love and sexiness and appreciation. I encourage partners to show intimacy and affection and hugging and holding. One of the interesting things is that, and I feel like we don't hold our children enough either. Do you know what the antidote to cortisol is?
Oh, well, from my point of view, it's
Mhm.
human connection and touch. It's like it's an exchange of energy.
That's exactly what it is. It's the oxytocin. So we live in such a stressful world that it raises our cortisol levels because we're stressed
Mm,
out. The number one thing that I hear from couples is the number one thing I hear from people talking about their sex life is, my parents never had sex. They never showed me anything. They never told me anything. And I say, well, I'm sorry about that, but it's actually your responsibility to learn about sex for yourself. It wasn't your mom and dad's, and they didn't know what they were doing. They did the best they could do. Forgive them, forget, and
right.
move on and handle it yourself. It's your job. And then the second thing that I hear from couples is, we're too stressed to have sex. And I think to myself, one of the techniques that we talked about recently was the soulmate
Yes.
embrace. This idea that you just lie down together and you enjoy the holding and being held. And often that will turn into a fabulous lovemaking session, but it should always be kept in a separate container, just with no
Right.
expectation that it becomes more. But that, and for those who are listening and watching us today, you can download the Soulmate Embrace technique for free at soulmateembrace.com. And that is the most important thing, is to keep holding each other, because that's what generates the oxytocin, and that's what lowers cortisol. And the interesting thing about oxytocin is that it makes you not only bond to your partner and to the other people in your family, but it makes you less annoyed with other people. And that's what's creating the stress in the first place. So oxytocin and a lot of people say, well, can I, like I do the intranasal to oxytocin, or, oh, I do the intravaginal to oxytocin. I'm a low oxytocin producer. I just don't seem to make enough. And one of the things that I do is I make my own yogurt at home that I put in my morning smoothie from a bacteria called Lactobacillus reuteri. And as we begin to understand how much of an onslaught our gut microbiome is taking with hormone, endocrine disruptors, disrupting our hormones and all the toxins we're taking and living in our 21st century world, we have lost this bacteria called Lactobacillus reuteri, and that is the bacteria that generates oxytocin. So I take a supplement called Gut to Glow, and I open the capsules and I put it in the milk, and I make my own nut milk. You can make it with dairy, you can make it with whatever milk you want, and I culture my yogurt with that bacteria that generates the oxytocin in my gut. So it's one more way that our gut is really running the show about our sex and love lives. And another way that you can do it, besides taking exogenous oxytocin, you can actually make your own inside.
I've always been a proponent that what you can generate within you, if it's testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, natural.
As much as you can. Yeah.
And there are nuances to this. I know that you work out every day. And
I do.
I'm a fanatic about staying in shape. It's for me,
you look
amazing. And this is
great.
And people go, yeah, exactly. I have a buddy, Joseph McClendon, and he happens to be African American. He goes, well, black don't crack and Asian don't age. And I go, okay, I know a lot of people. And I said, I'm only half Asian. So does that mean the Irish side of me is in trouble? But it's been interesting to see that people go, oh, but there's a vibrance to you. There's this energy. And I go, okay, well, my buddy Dave Asprey would say that's because you have mitochondrial intelligence and that you're a high energy level. And I said, you know what it is? It really is, to your point. The oxytocin, Julie and I have a tradition when we go to bed at night. And that is we cuddle together and fall asleep. And it's amazing because I sleep so much better. And in the past, it's a long story, but I'll just say we travel together now all the time. I mean, for business and for play and everything. And it's wonderful. When we were only traveling for play and I was going on these trips myself on business, I would sleep horrifically. Like it was like something always felt missing. And I didn't go into deep theta. It was like, it was just for whatever reason, I would just be anything, any bump in the night, I would hear it and be up.
Yeah.
And so I love what you said. And thank you for this. There's all these nuances that are clicking in my head, like proximity is power. And I go, well, it is. And yet it's also passion, connection, energetic flow. And I am so grateful for your commitment to helping people find lasting love, connection, communication, and fulfillment. There are so many folks now that they're into the science of success. Like, just show me, tell me this, and this. It's like going, well, practice doesn't make perfect. It makes permanent. And so if you practice poorly, so it's like, well, does it have to be perfect? I said, that's not what we're saying. We're not looking for perfection. We're looking for connection. Yeah. And it's like, oh, it feels so much more gratifying and scintillating. It's like, wow, there's all these possibilities instead of going, yeah, we're old.
You said something about vibration and harmonics, and it reminded me of a technique that I've been teaching for the last decade that I think might be of interest to you and everyone. And I wanted to say that I was mountain biking in the Dolomites with my husband for like 10 or 12 days. And then I had to fly to London and he flew home. And I I had plenty of people to see and do, but I was by myself, staying by myself in an Airbnb, but then I was out doing things with people. But I felt this attenuation of my joy.
Mm.
I felt flatter. Life was not as good. Here I was in London doing all these amazing things, talking to all these amazing people. But I realized what it was the loss of oxytocin from the touch that I was getting. So
Mm.
I think that what we're really saying here is that when you put a concerted effort, put your intention on finding someone or dating people who you really physically connect with, that you feel good with, and that are also a good values match for you. And I know you want to talk about values, and I do want to do that, but I want to give you a little technique before we do.
Please.
My friend Jim Benson is a Tantra trainer. He teaches men tantric lovemaking techniques. And I licensed and published his program, Multi-Orgasmic Lover for Men. And what it does is it takes ancient Taoist practices and it brings them into the 21st century for modern day man who has stamina issues, who wants to last longer, who
Mm.
feels performance anxiety when they're with a partner. And one of the videos that we shot was called the tuning fork technique. It's at tuningforktechnique.com. No, it's at tuningforktips.com. Tuning fork tips. And basically what Jim and I talk about is how lovers are like a set of tuning forks. If
Mm.
I have two forks and I hit one on a hard object and I hold it near the other fork starts to make the same sound and vibrate at the same resonance as the first
Yes.
tuning fork. And it was such a beautiful, it was Jim's analogy, and I've always loved it because he says that's what you want to do in the bedroom.
Mm.
You want to stay present.
Yes.
Instead of doing it, this is a natural thing that especially men do, is they get in their head and they strategize. I want to push this button and twingle this dial, and I'm going to get her to have a great time
Mhm.
by doing all the right things. And he's so up in his head creating anxiety. He's catastrophizing. He's worrying about what's going to happen. He's thinking about the last time things went wrong. He isn't present.
Yes.
And when I do my longitudinal data and I ask women what they want most in a relationship, in a sexual relationship, what the women say is number one, good grooming. Because men tend to forget, oh, I've got nose hairs, my toenails look like Shrek, I've got a little gut, I've got ear hair, whatever it is. They want good, clean,
Yes.
beautiful teeth. They want signs of health and vitality. This is why the muscles are attractive to the ladies, because it means you're healthy. It's an indication of health. That's number one for them, is good grooming and healthiness.
Mhm.
Number two is what they would call emotional connection, and what Jim would call presence.
Yes.
And what I would say is the tuning fork technique, which is when you're out here, back there, worried, strategizing, and you're not here with me, I can tell when you leave me.
Yes.
And when you leave me, I'm not getting the connection that I want. I need the physical touch, but I need the heart connection. And
Mm.
so many men don't have the connection from here to there. They haven't established it. So one of the things that Jim teaches is how to have heartgasms, how to connect your heart to your manhood so that she can feel your heart beating. I
Yeah.
have a technique I call my heart tongue technique for intercourse, for lovemaking. That is, when you can create that connection, she can feel your heart from within her. And so I think that's a very big takeaway for anyone that is in the dating world and feels performance anxiety is come back to presence, come back to connection, co-creation of the moment, not forcing things. And that happens whether it's physical intimacy or just regular intimacy.
Yes. It's beautiful too. Now that you say that, it's a feeling that you both know when you're in that state, and it's euphoric, it's amazing.
Yeah.
And the level of connection, words don't even need to be spoken. I mean, and yet if they are, amazing and great too, because what's coming out of you and emoting is so important. To your point, Julie and I hold hands everywhere. I mean,
Yeah.
it doesn't make a difference if we're at the mall, shopping, whatever. I mean, we just enjoy it, and it's a natural. It's nothing's forced. It's just a natural connection. It's almost like just polarity, if we want to call it that. And no, and I joke a little bit. I go, I think we embarrass our kids. The truth is, I'm very blessed to say that having a 23, a 20, and a 17-year-old, they love to give and receive hugs.
Yeah.
And I am so overjoyed to see that my 23-year-old son, who's 3 inches taller than I am, will go, "Hey, get a hug." It's like,
Yeah.
it's just that kindness and that nature, and they lead with this heart space, which is just a beautiful, beautiful testament. You brought up a portion of the conversation and something that you shared, and I love this, and it was about this ideology of blocking. It's like, what is it in relationships and boundaries, like the boundaries with which we live in, to your point. So if it's in the dating world, and I also believe that boundaries in a relationship are important too.
Yeah.
To have just clear understanding.
Yes.
And I don't, and I let me be very careful in my languaging. I don't know that it's a rules orientation as much as it's a belief, a feeling. And there are times when I will see people, and just speaking very candidly, they'll be in a business setting and go, "Oh, it's just a business dinner. I'm just going out with her because it's business." And yet they had an agreement that if we're going to go out with people, that it is not a trust thing, it's a respect thing. Like, you just, please, I'd love to be there. Or if we can't go out together, can at least we be cognizant about where we're spending our time and energy, so we don't have any uncomfortable feelings. And I go, well, okay. This was a conversation I had with a gentleman, and he goes, "What would you say to Julie about that?" And I would say, well, I love my wife. I trust my wife. I go, I don't think a meal is a break in intimacy. I said, but the respect, and if she asked me and it really made her feel uncomfortable, I said, I'm going to honor my wife. She's so brilliant and amazing, and I love her. Why would I want to give her any reason not to be a happy, fully fledged feeling human being? And I go, wait, so I just got to say no to dinner? And yeah, that's great. I'll be available in the next 2 nights. I'd love to have my wife join us. Does that sound good? And they're like, oh, that sounds pretty easy. I go, uh-huh.
Yeah.
And so what would you say to people, and when it comes to this notion of boundaries?
Yeah. I think boundaries is a weird word because it sounds like a fence.
Yes.
Like, a limit. But what's nice about boundaries is that, let's just call them my requested preferences.
Beautiful.
And when you give someone your requested preferences, then they know exactly how to let you know that you are loved and respected. And one of the things that's nice, let's go back to that dating situation where you're on a date and the person is saying, wow, maybe we should have sex. You say, well, I have some boundaries around that. The first thing is that I never am intimate with someone without a full panel of STI tests, because I really want to keep my health and my safety. But I'm super turned on by you and really interested in being close to you. And I'm having a hard time keeping my hands off you right now. And I was wondering if you'd be okay with having just touching each other and kissing and keep your underwear on. And I'm going to keep mine on. And that would make me feel really, really comfortable. Also, because I have to leave here in about an hour and a half, I'd like to set a timer for about 20 minutes till I have to go so that I can completely relax and lose myself in a makeout with you and we can just enjoy each other. And also because I have one more place I have to go after this, I was wondering if you could not mess up my hair or my makeup too much just this time. I'll let you know, if there's a next date. But I do, like I can't do a major repair and I've got one more thing I have to do. Are you good with those boundaries, with my requests on that? And they're going to say, yes, thank you. I can do that. That sounds good. I appreciate you letting me know what you can do and what you aren't willing to do. And then if at any time in that time that you're with them, they're like, how about just the tip? The good old, just the tip, Chuck, just the tip. You can say, well, that just made my personal alarm go off. Just the fact that you didn't hear my boundaries and honor them means that you're not the kind of person who will, and you'll keep pushing and pushing me. So I'm just going to get my stuff and go now. And I don't think we're a fit. Thank you.
That is such a brilliant dialogue. And the fact that you bring up the point of honor, that's presence. That is literally the essence of presence, is honoring the feminine, honoring the agreement, honoring the relationship, honoring the energy in the person. And there's so much sensationalism that has been kind of thrown to the four corners, to the wind, so to speak, and that anything goes. And they go, oh, I'm into spontaneity. I'm a free spirit. And it's like going,
free yourself right out of the room, baby.
Like, hey, you're free to go. You're free to take an Uber because I drove.
You're free to take an Uber. Exactly.
And this is part of the reality that we live in now. I mean, it's a whole different universe. It's a whole different universe. I know that our producer, he's so amazing. Thank you, Eduardo. So he's given us hey, you've got 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Good. And so this has already been great. And
good.
Thanks for having me. Say, my dear friend, anytime you want to speak within the Spanglish World Network, it would be an honor to have you.
Thank you.
How can people find out more about you? Because you are such a bastion of information, and your work is, and I don't mean to sound patronizing when I say this, you're a world changer. Intimacy and next level of love and connection is so imperative. I actually believe the world would be a far better place and much more humanistic and less adrenally fatigued and more splendor if we learned how to express and communicate exactly the way that you did, clearly stating boundaries. How can people find out more about the brilliance of who you are?
Yep, I have a newsletter. As a matter of fact, I'm on my way back to my desk to write some more. I do a love and relationship tips newsletter, and I'm teaching constantly. I just like to give away as much as I possibly can all the time and keep everything as current as I can. And that's at betterlover.com. You can sign up there for my newsletter. That's also a location that has hundreds of my videos. And then if you ever have any questions for me, you can just reply to any email that you get from me on my newsletter. I personally will get it and personally will reply to you. Sometimes the reply will be, oh, I have written an article about that. Here's your answer. Or here's a free ebook. Or try this and report back to me. And the report back to me is what I have been doing for decades giving my sex and relationship advice, because that's what makes me good at what I do. When you try something and it works or it doesn't, and it usually does, and you're like, what's the next step? Then I give you the next step and you are like, oh my God, I love that Susan Bratton. So that's what makes me happy, are all the love letters that I get from the people whose problems I've solved, because frankly, pretty much everybody has the same problems. You just think you're different and alone, and you're not. You are normal, and you're not broken. You are
Yes.
not. It's just you need to know what to do and why it happened. And
Yes.
so betterlover.com is a great place to get in touch with me and to kind of get in, it's a portal into my world.
Oh, you're amazing. Thank you, thank you,
Betcha.
thank you. Hey, for everyone, you heard it here tonight. Susan Bratton, you need to know this lady. She'll change your life. Susan, thank you so
Chuck.
much for joining us tonight. I'm going to remind
Mwah.
all of our viewers that this can be heard on the Spanglish Radio Network. Please check us out for all the news, all the programming, Spanglish World. Watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it. Thank you, my friend.